Today we're going to talk about phone fraud and how it is affecting the airline industry. According to Symantec, fraudulent tickets are costing the industry about $1 billion annually. Fraudsters are going out and creating their own travel agencies, if you will, where they are able to get customers and reserve tickets on their behalf using a number of different techniques. If you wanted to steal a ticket, there's a couple of different methodologies you could use. In the old days, your options were pretty much just physical. Later on in the late 90s, early 2000s, we saw the online angle. And nowadays, we're starting to see a spike in the use of the phone as the medium by which fraud is taking place. We believe that this is happening because these other angles are starting to be tightened down. Obviously, the physical angle, security, has been stepped up around airports in the last several years. In the online angle, we're starting to see more and more anti-fraud mechanisms that are functional. We're seeing things like intrusion detection systems and web application firewall. But the phone channel remains fairly unguarded. What we're seeing is that call center reservations in the airline industry account for about 8 to 10% of the total passenger revenue. Airlines are reporting a loss of about 1.2% of their revenue lost to phone fraud specifically. Very substantial amount of money. And what we're seeing across our customer base is a 30% increase in total fraudulent activity over the phone. In a telephone transaction, it's what the credit card industry calls card not present. In other words, the card is not there for the merchant to actually look at, compare against an ID, swipe through a machine, use the chip and pin, any of that sort of information. It's very easy for a fraudster to steal credit card information, then go purchase the ticket. Fraudster gets away with the ticket, the airline has to eat the cost of the ticket, and the legitimate user basically gets issued a new credit card. Impersonation fraud. People are pretending to be airline employees and using fake employee IDs to be able to book non-rev tickets. People obviously use bereavement fares. It's our understanding that most airlines don't even offer bereavement fares anymore because so many people were abusing those. Fraudsters might take over the account of a legitimate user and take advantage of their loyalty program. I could change some information about the loyalty program, the name of the person on file, book the ticket. It's likely that the victim may not even notice that those frequent flyer miles were spent. And we're even seeing pranks. There's weaknesses in the phone channel that allow travelers to go in and cancel the reservation of other travelers or even reassign their own seats. So these sorts of things can create disgruntled travelers and folks who won't want to use your airline any further. So how do we detect phone fraud? First, when you're talking to a business customer or you're talking to a fraudster, they're going to exhibit very similar behavior profiles. You're going to see last-minute bookings. Obviously, business customers are booking at the very last minute. Fraudsters will often book at the very last minute so that the legitimate owner of the credit card doesn't see the transaction on their statement before the travel is done. One thing to also keep in mind is cross-channel fraud. None of these sorts of attacks, quite honestly, happen through any one of the channels that we talked about. There's always some element of each of the channels that all combine into one attack. And so you really have to have safeguards in place on all three of these channels to be able to stop fraud in its entirety. And that's where Pindrop comes in, as we can tackle the issue of the phone channel. Really what Pindrop is providing is a way to authenticate and provide attribution to the caller. And the way that we do that is we analyze the audio signal of the phone call and pick out 147 different discrete features of the call. These are not necessarily things that are human perceptible. They're things that exist, say, in the carrier frequency of the call or in packet dropping that might occur in VoIP networks or codec transforms. We pull all that information out and we're able to train models that allow us to uniquely identify each device that might ever call into your call center. And we have several other risk factors that we then combine into a risk score that allows the call center to make a determination about how they want to handle the call. And so some best practices for your call center: obviously track phone fraud as it's occurring to you. Separate it out differently than the way you're tracking all the rest of your fraud across your environment. It's important to understand how much of the fraud is occurring over the phone. Detect phone fraud, right, by deploying Pindrop's fraud detection system and using our phone printing technology. And finally, authenticate your callers. Knowledge-based authentication questions simply aren't enough, so you need some way to provide that direct attribution to ensure that you are in fact talking to who you think you're talking to.